Good afternoon. We would like to acknowledge the land that Getty inhabits today was once known as Tabangar, the home of the Gabrielino Tongva people. We show our respects to the Gabrielino Tongva people as well as all First People, past, present, and future, and honor their labor as original caretakers of this land. Getty commits to building relationships with the Gabrielino Tongva community, and we invite you to acknowledge the history of this land and join us for caring for it. Thank you for joining us for today's conversation. My name is Greg Sandoval. I'm from the Getty Museum Public Programs team. And today's conversation complements a special exhibition currently on view called Lumen, The Art of Science and Light, which is on view at the Getty Center through December 8th. This is a magnificent exhibition, so for those of you who are here today, please take some time to visit the galleries after the talk. And if you are watching online, please come and visit us before it closes on December 8th. Charles' site-specific installation, Spectrum 14, which is on view in the Rotunda, will actually be on extended view at, probably through September 2026. So you will have some time to experience that. We have had some sun popping out today, so you can actually see some of the spectrals in the lobby after today. Before we get started, I just have a few quick notes. For guests here in the lecture hall, please take a moment to silence your phones. For online attendees, closed captioning has been enabled. So to access the captioning, click the CC icon on the Zoom menu bar at the bottom of the screen. And time permitting, we will be taking some questions. So for online attendees, please drop your questions in the Q&A box on the Zoom menu. And for those of us here in the auditorium, we will have mics that will come down so that everyone can hear your question for Charles. Now I'd like to turn the program over to the Getty Research Institute curator, Glenn Phillips, who's going to introduce Charles and today's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay. It's hard to tell down here how the mic is doing. And welcome Charles Ross, the artist that we're speaking with today. If I can get our first slide up. So the occasion for the talk today is this incredible new commission in our rotunda called Spectrum 14, and here we can see Charles Ross in one of the in the spectral light that this piece casts throughout our rotunda. We have 14 enormous 8-foot prisms mounted in a couple different locations in the rotunda, and they cast this light throughout the day, and it changes over the day and it changes over the year. And we're going to get to that piece later in our talk, but what we really want to do today is talk about the full extent of Charles's work, because he has many different bodies of work that paint just such an interesting picture for an artistic investigation. And so Charles, I think we're back in time, also showing Charles surrounded by some prisms. And Charles, these were not the earliest pieces you were making, but these prisms, I think, were maybe a significant change in your work that sets you on a direction that kind of takes you until now. Mm-hmm. And so could you tell me a little bit about how you first started making these prism sculptures in the mid-1960s?
Well, I was doing welded steel sculpture, and then I was moved into lattice sculptures, so I was interested in transparency. And on Thanksgiving weekend in 1965, I dreamed the engineering drawings for how to build a large liquid-filled prism, which, so I swept my studio clean, sent everything out to the dump, and started over building prisms.
So you literally, in your dream, you saw the plan, and you remembered
how to do it. It was like the engineering drawings. Yeah.
And well, did it work? I mean, did it work the first time, or did you have to?
No, actually, it didn't work the first time because I went to an engineer, And I was building a prism that was about 6 feet high and with sides this big. And he was the wrong engineer. He wasn't a hydrostatic engineer, he was a mechanical engineer, and he said that 1/4-inch plexiglass would do it. I was filling the first prism, and it got up, being filled about 5 feet high, and I heard these strange, I was filling it with water at the time. I heard these strange noises, and it exploded and threw me over several tables, like 30 feet across the room. Fortunately, I got hit flat, not sideways, so I didn't get cut in half. And Michael Heiser had the studio below me at the time. This was in San Francisco. And he was painting. And he had stepped back from his painting, and we had big cracks in the floor. And a sheet of water went between him and his painting, and then disappeared in the crack in his floor. And he came running upstairs, and he said, "Am I tripping? Did I take acid and forget about it? What? This is what just happened." And then he saw me laying on the floor, and we had a great laugh. So that was the first one.
Wow, that really makes me glad we're using solid ones upstairs.
Yeah, they're solid now. But the earlier prisms were about capturing images, if you go back one further even. Yeah, they were about capturing images in the room. The prism kind of brings separate views of the room into one thing. And so that's what I was interested in. And then after a few years, I decided to make one to go in my window. And after that, I've just been working with spectrum.
And so here we see, like, this is light being shined onto this array and sort of casting light in the room.
Yeah, that's just spotlights. This was at Finch College, I think.
Yeah. So some of the pieces, and here's a color version. So I think you're saying that in the earlier pieces, it's about the refractions and seeing these different reflections, and then the interplay with light and reflecting into a space became another component.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, when I put the first spectrum casting prism in my window in New York at 80 Worcester Street, it was just fascinating to watch it move through the room. And as it goes over things, it changes the identity of the objects. It also changes the identity of the space around them. And so I became fascinated with that. But here's some of the early prisms that are capturing images. This is capturing the clouds in the sky.
So this is capturing inside, and then here also.
Right.
And
that
so
was
I guess
one of the first shows at Dwan Gallery.
So each one has a different angle, so it would have been sort of capturing a different version of the
truncated cube, where I cut different parts of the cube off until it became a triangle. That's Virginia Dwan, levitating behind a prism wall.
And so these outdoor, would these be casting light, like this piece that's outdoors?
It would, but the main, once again, that was really about how it brought the image down from up above down into the ground. This is a prism coffin.
So is the person actually inside there, or is she reflected?
No, she's laying on the floor behind it.
So she's reflected sort of into it.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah.
This is where they were still about what they did with the capturing images in the room.
So was this presented almost like a performance, this one?
No, we just made the photograph.
I see. So anyone could sort of put themselves into the image if they
This
wanted.
was my second show in Dwan, which had very big prisms in it.
And this one, this is related to Muybridge, right?
Yeah, this is the Muybridge wall.
Yeah.
And when someone steps behind that wall, two images of them appear. And two images of the person appear, and they appear to be moving at different speeds. And then when he comes out the other side, the images come together.
Wow.
So I thought that was a good reference to Muybridge. And this is a spectrum spotlight.
So you would take the prism, you would shine a spotlight, and it would cast the spectral light.
Right.
Yeah. Do you see this as, I mean, this seems like a work that's on the way to the solar spectra works with the sun.
This was being done at the same time I was working on the spectrum, and I tried to bring the spectrum indoors with spotlights, but I really didn't like what happened with the spotlights. So
Is it because of the quality of the light or because it was too static?
quality of the light, and it was static.
Yeah.
Wasn't moving and alive like the solar spectrum is.
So what about these
This was a
column
show of
pieces?
prism columns at the old Custom House in downtown New York.
And in this case, I mean, you're seeing a lot of color reflected in the...
Yeah, this is picking up light from windows that are off to the left.
Oh, I see. So that's what we're seeing here is windows that were not seen in the photograph.
Yeah, window and a door, it looks like, down
door.
beyond bottom.
Yeah. But would these pieces also cast spectral light if the sun were to hit them?
This would, but
Yeah.
you'd need only at sunrise and sunset.
Only at sunrise and sunset. Yeah. This is another view.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then here in these, it seems you're really seeing the spectral light inside the...
Inside the prism, right.
And is this a piece that's meant to be placed in sunlight, or is this just how this one happens to be photographed right now?
Mostly that's, once again, meant to capture
Yeah.
some line of light somewhere in the room and pull it into the prism.
So so now we're looking at an image of a solar spectrum piece, and it's the same series as what we have upstairs in the rotunda. And Charles, maybe you could describe how these pieces work a little bit.
This is the Harvard Business School chapel, Moshe Safdie architect. This is the second piece I did with him. Actually, he commissioned me in, I think it was 73 or 74, to work with him on the Yeshivat Templat Joseph, I think it was called. Anyway, it was a rabbinical school built above the Wailing Wall in the old city of Jerusalem. And we were well on our way to making the prisms when the conservative rabbis announced that light had nothing to do with the Jewish religion, and they were sealing off the skylights. Moshe wrote a book about it. It was an absolute nightmare project for him. And then 20 years later, I get a call, and he said, "Remember that project we worked with in Jerusalem? Well, I have a place for it now." And it became the Harvard Business School chapel.
Yeah. And so there are prisms mounted in the skylight.
Yes,
Yeah.
you can see the prisms there mounted in the skylight.
Yeah. And you're angling them in really specific ways. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, each one is, I have a model machine in New York, which I can put a model on, and I can duplicate the sun passing over the building for any place on the planet, for any hour of the day, and for any day of the year. And so I put a model on, and I start with one prism, and I start putting it in, just playing to see what it'll do. And it usually takes like a month to get the first prism in. And then after that, I start building on what that prism will do and build a kind of orchestration of color that'll shift and change not only by the day, but with the seasons in the building. This is the Tampa Federal Courthouse.
And for every solar spectrum installation, you've done a model like that.
Yes,
that's how
absolutely.
you determine it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I witnessed this. We had to make a model of the Getty space, and basically you can sort of tilt it one way, and that is times of the year, and you can tilt it another way, and that's hours of the day. So you can kind of dial it into a season, and then run the day to see what's really going to happen.
A single prism won't capture the sun through an entire day or for an entire year. And so you have different prisms angled to project spectrum at different times of day and then different seasons. The Tampa Courthouse is an interesting story. About a year after this piece was installed, a palm tree outside the building caught fire. And it was actually from the reflection of the glass of the building. But there was a judge in the courthouse, federal judge, who was sure it was the prisms. And so, fortunately, I had good connections. I knew the senior judge in this. This is where they try all the bad guys in this courthouse, like, the Colombian drug lords and people like that. So there's a tremendous amount of security. But she was sure that, and she wanted the prisms taken down. And the senior federal judge talked to me about it, and we arranged for a physicist to sit next to her at a dinner and convince her that prisms could not set palm trees on fire, and so the piece stayed. As far as I know, it's still there.
But you can actually, as you explained to me, the prismatic light is cool light.
Right.
It's being dispersed, not focused. And I think part of the experience of these pieces is actually going into the spectral light. You can you can bathe in that light, and it doesn't feel like your face is about to burn off. It feels really nice, actually. So you'll get to burning things in a minute. And this one it's very high up, right? That seems
Yeah,
like
this
a really
is like I think it's a 17-story high atrium, something like that. It's very high.
Yeah.
Which is why the spectrum is so big when it comes down. This is in Saitama University in Saitama, just outside of Tokyo. It's a medical school, and they actually use the spectrum to talk about the healing colors of light. And Riken Yamamoto was the architect.
Yeah. And here you can see sort of how the prisms are mounted. And each sort of building, they're mounted in a different way because each building requires something different.
And if you go back when I met Riken Yamamoto, he came up to me and he said, so I make your art disappear. And I knew exactly what he meant. He wanted to hide the prisms up inside the structure of the ceiling, so you didn't know where the spectrum came from. But he really thought he got me. We had a good laugh. And this is Meiji University in Tokyo. It's the oldest university in Japan.
And in case it's not clear, they're moving throughout the day, and so the same spectrum that maybe appears one size on the floor, when it then jumps to the wall, it can stretch to be really, really long, and it happens very fast. Like in the afternoons here, you can see it before your eyes beginning to stretch up, and that motion that you begin to perceive is the rotation of the Earth. Like this is a piece that's actually making you more aware of the planet that we're on, right? And then if you come back over time, it's completely different every time, and that's because of the orbit of the Earth around the sun, right?
Yes.
And that's something you very much think about in making these pieces.
Yeah, this is also at Meiji.
So what you see, on one day, if you see something amazing at 1 p.m. today and you come back 1 p.m. tomorrow, it's going to be a little bit different. And when we were first working on the Getty piece, I was like, it's going to be a little bit different, like by millimeters. No, it's more. When we were, first installing the Getty piece from one day to the next, at the same time, it might be 2 feet different from one day to the next. So it's always shocking. This is the first one that I saw. So this is in Washington, D.C., right?
Yeah, it's the Museum of the American Indian.
Yeah. And this one's very interesting because it's actually quite small prisms.
Yeah.
And they're sort of in a line, but all at different angles, right?
They're in a window,
Yeah.
in a vertical stack, and they're
Here
only
they are.
about this wide.
Yeah.
There it is.
But they, am I correct that with this one you were thinking very specifically about the geography of that piece and where it is in relation to its surroundings? Is that true? Thinking about the Potomac, for instance.
Well, they invited me to bring spectrum into their ceremonial room. And that's what we did.
Yeah.
This is the Dwan Light Sanctuary in Montezuma, New Mexico.
And could you tell us more about the overall of this piece, sort of what it's meant to be and how it came about?
Well, Virginia came to me, I'm not sure when we did this piece, in the 90s, right? Came to me in like 92 or 93 and said she wanted to create a place for quiet contemplation, a kind of meditation space that would bring the spectrum color in for purposes of meditation. And so we worked together over a couple of years in the model to design this.
Virginia Dwan, who we've mentioned a couple times, she was one of the most important gallerists showing in New York and Los Angeles, and a major supporter of so many important artist, from minimalists to land artists,
Yeah.
and someone that you showed with very early on and throughout.
She showed Sol LeWitt, Carl Andre, Michael Heiser, Robert Smithson, Walter Di Maria, Ryman, myself, and a whole bunch of other people. Dan Flavin. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the most incredible list, and I think one of those gallerists who was known to be just so supportive of what the artists in the gallery were making.
And I have a great story about Virginia, actually. I knew Sol LeWitt, and I was casting about for getting a gallery in New York, and Sol said, I think Virginia has a big collection of quartz crystals. Why don't you go see her? So I went up to the gallery, into the office, and she looked at me and said, oh no, not another artist. Go away, go away. The gallery's filled. I can't talk to any more artists. Go. And I said, but I make big prisms. And she said, really? Can I come down tomorrow? And she came to my studio and bought the collapsing cube prisms, which you showed in one of the first photos, and became a dear friend. So.
And this one is very near where you spend part of your year in New Mexico and part in New York, and we're going to get to the New Mexico part in a minute.
Right.
But this is also very near where you're.
It's near Las Vegas, New Mexico.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not Nevada, New
So
Mexico.
it must have been nice to have a sort of major piece near where you live.
Yeah.
And this is a really dazzling space because there are prisms sort of both above and on the sides, and so they're kind of hitting you from all directions. And Kristen Collins and Nancy Turner, who together with me were the co-curators of the Lumen exhibition and the commissioners of this piece, we just visited last week, so it's very fresh on our mind. And, I can say that over the time we were there are a lot of people coming in and out, but including a visitor that was just broke into song, sort of in the middle of the spectra. So it's I think part of these pieces for me, what I enjoy about them is seeing that they make people happier, they inspire them. Mm-hmm. And I think you look at these pieces and they're very minimal form. A lot of times they're almost mathematically based, like you could describe it and it sounds almost scientific. But then the actual experience is so different. It's visceral. And you can see that sort of joy. And I think that's actually true for a lot of minimalism. If you read the way critics were writing about it in the 60s, and when I was growing up, not in the 60s, but reading what people had written in the 60s, I was like, oh my God, this is so boring. Is this really what we have to think is important? And then over time, as you actually experience those pieces and realize that they're about light hitting an object and how space can change, and that it actually can bring you joy, and it can actually show you that there's a big difference between the way you logically work something out on paper and then how it actually plays out in front of you. And so bringing that sort of great physical, joyful experience, to me, is a lot of what this work is about.
And this is a story of the magical things, way things happen. Virginia and I looked all over New Mexico and part of Colorado looking for a place to build this. And this is on the United World College campus in Montezuma, New Mexico. That particular college was founded by Armand Hammer and Prince Charles. But we were looking around and we went to see Phil Geyer, who was president of the school, and mentioned this project to him and said, he had a spot on campus that was perfect among other spots we'd found. And the next day, Virginia flew back to New York the next day, and the day after that, Phil was in her apartment in New York telling her it had to be on the United World College. And that's how the site got chosen. Yeah.
Yeah, really, really spectacular piece. And here we'll just briefly, this is in Tasmania, right?
Yeah, this is in Tasmania, at the Museum of Old and New Art.
Yeah.
David Walsh's private museum that's bigger than the Museum of Modern Art, and he lives in it. It's got a spectacular collection.
And here's the piece at the Getty, Spectrum 14. And these are some pictures from when you visited, and then we have some snaps that I took. But, I think this piece, in a way, it's been this, it's an amazing piece for when you visit, but it's turned out to be this amazing piece for our staff, because it really does change every day. And, and it's sort of hitting all of us. Like here it's hitting this little terrace upstairs, but then 2 days later it was hitting the wall next to it, and you never really know what's going to happen. I mean, certain things, almost every day, by the afternoon we'll have some giant ones that are sort of jumping up the travertine wall here, which is,
It's changing particularly a lot at this time of year, like around the equinoxes, it'll change.
Yeah.
When you get into winter, it'll stay the same for about 2 months, month and a half. And in the summer solstice, it stays about the same for a month and a half, and then it'll start to shift faster and faster.
And you described, you call some of them summer prisms and winter prisms.
Yeah.
Could you explain a little more about the
Well, like I
angles
said, the prism won't capture the angle of the sun for an entire year. So I usually start with winter solstice and summer solstice with the prisms. And most of those prisms will work spring and fall. But the winter prisms won't go into summer, but they'll go into spring, and they'll start showing up in fall. And then the summer prisms overlap also. And so spring and fall, you have a lot of activity, and then it quiets down and tends to repeat itself around the solstices, and then it'll start changing again.
And the Lumen exhibition is actually an exhibition about medieval science, but we have 7 contemporary pieces that are interspersed throughout the show. And I think part of why we thought that Charles's piece was so perfect for that show is that it is a piece that is about making you be more in tune with the rhythm of a day and with the rhythm of a year, and sort of knowing that the sun is in different places at different times and in different seasons. Because for a pre-modern person, we need to know all of that stuff now, but our phones do it for us, right? We don't actually have to be connected to know when to plant or to know how to navigate. But I think that for earlier people, it was so crucial to sort of know where the sun was going to be, to know where the stars are, so that you can do these things. And so the notion of these pieces, that they make you think a little bit more about we're on a planet that's moving and where it's going, is connecting us to this really, really long tradition with our ancestors that we want you to have in your mind when you then go visit this exhibition that is showing these long lineages.
And the Getty site was perfect for making a piece where you could walk through the spectrum. In a lot of the pieces, you see the spectrum on the walls and you observe it, but here you can actually walk through it and stand in it.
And it wants you to recycle, obviously. And then in the afternoons, quite often, the experience of really walking up the staircase in that rotunda is very important, the way that the light hits in many different angles. So some people don't notice that, but it's very, very gorgeous. And so we encourage you all to sort of walk the stairs, particularly in the afternoon. And then we have a little bit of a time lapse, and the beginning of this time lapse is actually before the piece was even fully completed. It took us a number of weeks to actually get the piece fully out. But even once the first spectra started showing, it was really spectacular. But just to see how it moves, and you can see people kind of pausing in it and doing their photo shoots in it. And again, this is the motion over one day. Over 1 year, it's completely different. And I think what I found with this one, I'd say approximately every week, if I go a week without seeing it, I'm shocked when I come back. It's changed enough after a week that I can't recognize it from the week before. And Charles, this is it's. I went back. When we first had the model, we were sort of filming with our phones through it to see what a day was like, and the model really is pretty accurate.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The model is so accurate, actually, the spectrum falls within about 2 feet at any given time. In reality, falls within 2 feet of where it is in the model.
Yeah.
So that's only that much difference in a space that big. Very precise.
Yeah. And we have these nice moments. Every day it passes across our info desk, and so our employees at the info desk get to be in rainbow light for, 10, 15 minutes. I mean, it does move pretty fast. And then here you can see how it sort of goes up the walls. And so those benches have never been more popular than when this all starts happening.
The model machine I used to do this, I thought I had invented. And somebody told me that there's one quite similar in Florence that we used by Renaissance architects to study the way the shadows fell across their buildings.
So I told people we'd get to burning later, and we have arrived at not dispersing the light, but focusing the light. And this is a series you call these solar burns.
Solar burns, yeah. I wanted to do something that was the opposite of the solar spectrum in the early 70s. And so, as you said, like as the prism spreads the light, I thought, okay, we'll focus the light into a single point of raw power and see what it draws on a wooden plank. And each of these burns is one day with a wooden plank being placed under a lens. And as the sun goes across the sky, it burns its path across the plank. Sunny days are continuous, very solid burns. And if there are clouds, they cause unburned interruptions. And you can see a variety of...
So the ones where you see it where it looks like it stops and starts, that is clouds.
Yeah.
And then this one is this was a very long burn, right?
Yeah, this is from solstice to solstice, so that's half a year.
Yeah, and where it looks, I mean, it almost looks like a hand has drawn, right? And each of those is a day. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Each one's a day.
Yeah.
Right.
And I recently saw one of these pieces. What you can't see here is it's really deep. Like the longer you do it, you have to make the ground thicker, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andy Warhol commissioned me to do his portrait in solar burns. So I did Leo, because he was a Leo.
Yeah.
And New York is very cloudy during the month of August. Yeah. And so half of the burns were blank. And he was just thrilled. He said, "Look at me, I'm blank."
Well, and this is a permanently installed
Permanent
piece,
install
right?
in the Chateau de Warone in Warone, France. It's in the Loire Valley near Richelieu, actually, and Loudun.
And this pattern, there's a pattern that's embedded into the floor here. Could you tell us about?
The spiral in the floor, we took each burn. The burns change. They curve this way in the summer and this way in the winter, and they straighten out in spring and fall. And I thought we decided we wanted to figure out what they look like if you put them end to end.
Yeah.
And I figured it would be an S-shaped curve, like the ecliptic is on a star map. The path of the sun going through the stars is always shown as this kind of curve. But we started putting them together, and they made this spiral. And I had an assistant who spent a month making the winter half of the spiral, which is the far one, and the closer one's summer half of the spiral. And the difference in the spiral is, this was not known, actually. This was discovered in the solar burns. But the difference is the burns actually capture the day-to-day change of the speed of the Earth moving in its orbit. And when we got this double spiral, I took it up to Kenneth Franklin, who was head of the planetarium in New York, the Hayden Planetarium. And he was a solar astronomer. And he said, "I know your work, so I know this spiral is coming from the sun, but I have no idea what this is." And he said, "But I remember some weird spiral somewhere, so I'll give you a call." if I think of it. 2 weeks later, he called me and said, call the Naval Observatory. So I called the Naval Observatory, and they said, send us a picture. And they had calibrated the Longwood sundial in the DuPont Gardens outside of Philadelphia to find out how accurate a sundial could be. Turns out the Longwood sundial is accurate within seconds for keeping time. But in the process of doing that, calibrating that, their computer had spit out bits and pieces of a spiral, and they said, we had no idea what it was, so we threw them in a drawer, and you just sent a photograph of it to us. So let's get together. And I was in with the Naval Observatory, and they became very instrumental in working with me on star axis and providing the dates for in the star tunnel.
Wow.
So,
Yeah. These are called portraits, right?
these are human-sized solar burns.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But explain that. What is a human-sized solar burn? You have to determine the length of the burn based on the height of the person?
Yeah, they're about 6. The burn itself is about 6 feet long.
Yeah.
And the board is about 7 feet. So
And so the different curves you see here mean you've done it at different times of year.
different times a year. The one on the far right is winter part of the year. The one in the middle is close to more in the spring or the fall, and the one on the left in the set of 3 is summer. And the 2 pairs, you have a summer and a winter opposite each other.
Yeah. And just so people are clear, you don't move the lens. It's the sun that is moving as the Earth rotates, and that is what is making the line.
The only thing we do is tilt the lens so that the sun is focused on the center of the board, which has to, changes from winter to summer, but that's it. Otherwise, everything is fixed, and it's just the sun drawing the portrait of sunlight for the day.
Yeah. I'm going to skip this piece because I'm looking at the time, and I want to get through one more body of work and then talk about star axis. So these are works you make using raw pigment and explosives.
And explosives, we use dynamite primer cord, which burns at something like, I forget what it is, 25, 30 miles a second. It's a Class A explosive. It comes in the form of string, and so I can draw with it. And this is a painting being made.
And so here's an example.
This is a smaller explosion, but this is Richard Feynman's classic portrait. I did a lot of drawings about the behavior of light at the subatomic level, at the quantum level. And this is the scientific name of this line drawing is electron-positron scattering by photon decay. The title of the drawing is Richard Feynman's classic portrait.
So you've arranged the cord in that shape.
I arranged the cord in that line,
and then you put the raw pigment.
We sprinkle pigment on it and then detonate the cord.
And that's how you get this.
Yeah.
Right. And then here's another. This is a larger one, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is this one?
I don't know. I can't.
Oh,
read
this
that.
is Higgs. Yeah. This is the Higgs particle. Glenys Farrar is a friend of mine. She was Feynman's research assistant, and she worked on the Higgs particle when they discovered it in CERN. And so I did this. This is the theoretical Feynman diagram for how the Higgs would behave.
Okay, so now we want to turn to star axis, and this is a piece that you have been working on for the last 50 years.
Yes.
And it's also a piece that Kristen and Nancy and we were there on Tuesday. So it's really fresh on our minds and an amazing art experience. And I will say this is a piece that is, emotionally included in the Lumen exhibition. In the catalog, it has a catalog entry, just like a checklist item. And there is a special label inside the show that talks just 100 words about it. But can you tell us about Star Axis?
Star Axis is a naked eye observatory, a sculpture to observe the stars. And what it's focused on is a 26,000-year cycle of precession and how it affects the pole star, our pole star Polaris. Polaris is now almost Let's see, the celestial pole is the axis of the Earth projected out into space. It's the point around which all the stars turn. And it would be the center of this photograph. And that bright star right near the center is Polaris. Right now, Polaris is turning in a circle about smaller than the size of a dime held at arm's length. But as the pole is shifting slowly in the sky, it turns in a 47-degree circle. So as the pole moves away from any star, Polaris, and this star axis is focused on Polaris, as the pole moves away, Polaris will spiral out to turn in bigger and bigger circles of sky. And like I said, right now it's about the size of a dime held at arm's length, smaller than that. But 13,000 years from now, Polaris will turn in a circle that encompasses your entire field of vision. And when I was making some drawings of the Great Pyramids in 1971 when I ran into precession. And when I discovered that here's this, our North Star pulses in the human visual field, smaller than a dime, the size of bugs and pebbles and things, out to everything you see, I thought, not good enough to know about this. I want to walk through it. And that was the impetus for building Star Axis. It's a 10-story high staircase that's exactly aligned with the axis of the Earth and pushed inside the mesa.
And
this is the entrance to...
This is the entrance?
And the staircase is the slot you see. Yeah, there you go.
With the oculus at the top.
There's an oculus at the top, and because Polaris is over time pulsing in turning in different circles for different periods of history, the view from each one of these stairs is dated, and the view from each stair frames the circle in the sky that Polaris will turn in from the date, if you stand on the stair in that date. So you can walk through different layers of history and stand on the stair that Cleopatra would have had to stand on to see Polaris turn in the aperture, which she'd see a much bigger circle of sky than what you see now. From the very bottom of the stairs, you see the circle that Polaris will turn in 2100. And that's the other magical thing about this cycle. Our axis is perfectly aligned with Polaris, our pole star, in 2100. Not 2099 or 2101, but 2100, which seems pretty amazing to me.
I think part of the reason, you could think of it like a wobble, like the Earth sort of wobbling a little bit, right?
Yeah.
That sets it off. And part of why I say this is emotionally included in the Lumen Show is because it's medieval astronomers that sort of began to realize this. And they called it the precession of the equinoxes. And the reason why was because enough time had passed that the ancient Greek measurements were different than what the contemporaries were getting. Right. And instead of doing what I think people would do today and saying, they were wrong and I am right, they said, oh my God, the entire planet is moving. And that was the correct answer. And it happened not just it happened in cultures all over the world around the same time. This was something that the world discovered over time. And so it's an incredible thing. And in Star Axis, by walking these stairs, you can visualize it. So moving up the stairs as the oculus gets larger in your field of view.
And at night, when you start at the bottom, up a few stairs, because we're not quite at 2100, you see Polaris sit on the rim of this oculus. And as you walk up the stairs, Polaris centers itself inside for you. And I've even had astronomers do a double take, because of course that's not possible. But what's happening is the field you're looking at is getting bigger, and it makes the star appear to move to the center and align itself with you as you walk up the stairs. A pretty special experience.
It's sitting on a mesa, right? And so there's not a lot around. The sky is incredible. You can see the Milky Way. Just the sky itself is such an experience. And then you begin walking up this staircase, and you go one person at a time, because otherwise anyone ahead of you is going to block the view. and you hold on to the handrails, and you begin outdoors, and then you're slowly going up, and you're keeping Polaris in your field of view, and then it gets to a part where things are covered, and now you're really in darkness. And it's a little scary, and it's a little emotional, and but I think you said let Polaris guide you. Yeah. And you do, and you're very brave, and and there are no spiders in there, and you just keep going.
And the other thing is, the further back in time, and it's dated both into the past and into the future. The further backward in time and the further forward in time you go, the harder you work, because the distant dates are at the very top of this 10-story staircase with no landings. So you're pretty out of breath when you get back to 13,000 BC.
Yes. Yeah, but just through the act of doing that, you sort of pass through 26,000 years of history. Yeah. But you're also, I think you use the phrase, you're tracing geometry through time.
Yeah.
Right? Like on the one hand, this staircase is this direct line up to the pole star. And then there's this motion of the Earth that's spiraling around at the same time, and so it's an incredible visualization. And I was thinking about, again, we were talking about minimalism, right? And which sort of you grew out of in a way, and people talked about that as sort of making you more aware of the space around you. Mm-hmm. And then in your work, it's the space around you and the planet. And the stars and time and sort of where we are in these massive cycles, and it's just incredible, particularly in a piece that, I mean, it's so complex but also so simple. And in the show upstairs, our special label for Star Axis is next to a medieval sighting tube that's designed for someone to sight Polaris and tell the times of day, and this is really a giant sighting tube, in some ways, but. 50 years of effort. No, think about that. 'Cause I just turned 50 this year, and so to be focused on accomplishing this one thing over that amount of time is really incredible.
Well, it started out much simpler. It was going to be a staircase on the side of a mesa with just a ring at the top of a metal staircase that would frame the pole star. And we were building the foundations for this staircase, and for 30 consecutive mornings, I woke up every morning with this mantra that said, you have to enter the Earth to reach the stars. You have to enter the Earth to reach the stars. And I thought, oh, shit. That means I got to take this staircase back inside the mountain, which added a couple of $1 million to the cost of building it, and probably 20 years of time. So...
And I will say, seeing these pictures, they're so beautiful, but I think for us, the drive there, it's bigger than it looks. Let me say that. Like it's, and sort of seeing it from the distance and seeing that scale, and it really is sort of part of the mountain now, is one of the extraordinary things about it.
That last photograph, I have never seen that. That's moonlight on the stairs with the rest of the pyramid in the dark. Jarl Mohn took that photo. Oh. Yeah. And as far as I know, no one but Jarl has ever seen that.
Amazing. Yeah. And then here we're looking at what's called the hour chamber, right? This opening.
That's the shadow field. Yeah.
Oh, this is the shadow field.
That's the shadow. Yeah, it's not finished there. I think the last photo you have shows the shadow field now. But the shadow field captures all the shadows of the pyramid during the course of a year.
Yeah. So that's the how far the shadow extends, you then trace that over the course of a year, and it's right. A shape. And this triangular opening that you see on the structure itself, that's the hour chamber. Right?
The hour chamber.
Yeah.
When you sit inside the hour chamber, you can see the stars turn for an hour of rotation of the Earth. In the nighttime picture, any star that appears on the left side of that will move to the right side in the course of an hour, if you're sitting back on the bench that frames this.
And that's Polaris that you see at the top.
That's Polaris at the top.
It's going to move
right.
very little in an hour. Yeah. And so here, this is an example of where you'd be tracing the shadow field.
But the shadow field is now a white chalk. Yeah. So it's very white, field. This was before we added the white. There it is.
Yeah, so that's the shadow field. And you made a comment that anything, like any street sign over the course of the year is going to trace this same shape,
Yeah.
right? Because
Every
it's really,
fence post,
Yeah,
every telephone pole draws this on the ground twice a year, except that you never see it. In the shadow field, it's been captured.
all right. It is time to turn to questions. We actually did pretty well in terms of how we wanted the timing. I have some that have been coming through from Zoom, and I think I'm gonna start with those, and then you in the audience here think about your questions, and we'll turn to them. So if I see a name, I'm going to read it. So hopefully people don't want to be anonymous. But Karen Johansson is asking, curious about the model machine. Did you have that custom designed, or how did you make it yourself?
I designed it, and I had a machinist make it.
Laura Hoffman is asking, says you seem to use acrylic as a material. Do you find that leaded crystal, the type of material used by Libby Glass, early 20th century, or Swarovski crystal, creates more defined rainbows, or does the weight of leaded crystal preclude using this material?
I didn't completely understand.
They're asking if you've worked with leaded crystal at any point. Or,
I have not, no.
Okay. So they're asking about a sort of difference in the way leaded crystal versus acrylic might cast light, but I think you've primarily worked with acrylic.
I primarily work with acrylic. I think leaded crystal's about the same. The spectrum might be a tad brighter, but barely noticeable.
And do we have a question in the audience? We'll start here. Wait for the microphone to come, because our friends on Zoom will then be able to hear you better. So we have a microphone coming right here.
Thank you. Mr. Russ, I've read a little bit about you, your biography, and amazing art, and I really appreciate the science, the quantum aspect, string theory, multiple imagery. In a lot of indigenous cultures, religion intersects with art and science. So my question to you is there, if any, a spiritual aspect that you can speak about in your concept of your work?
Well, it's called light, which certainly has a spiritual component. For me, the amazing thing about light is that it's filled with forms and structures and information. And so my interest has been to reveal that. But in my personal practice, I do a lot of light meditation also. Yeah.
And does that relate to Hindu philosophy of light and vibration being the makeup of most of the universe?
I like the idea. You can, in the big spectrum, feel different sensations from the light of different colors on your skin. Yeah.
We had another question here back here.
Hi. If you put an oculus at the center of the North Pole, directly overhead, would the pole star be in the center of the oculus there all the time? Is that how that works?
He's asking if you put an oculus at the North Pole, would Polaris always be centered in it?
Horizontal oculus.
It would be, first of all, the oculus would be straight over your head
Right.
at the North Pole. So it would be a vertical ladder to go up toward it. Yes, it would, but it would change the same way it changes everywhere else.
Is there any,
Over time, it would turn in bigger and bigger circles, even at the North Pole.
because of the wobble of the Earth, right?
Yeah.
Wait, what's
Yeah.
the wobbling? Is there an equivalent in the southern hemisphere of the North Star?
He's asking if there's an equivalent in the southern hemisphere.
No, there isn't. It's a dark spot in the sky. The only way you can find the southern pole is the South Pole is with the Southern Cross, but it's I think it's 15 degrees away or something like that, quite a long way.
And you did make a comment that star axis could not be much more north than it is because the stairs would get too steep.
Right, it's the stairs are parallel to the Earth's axis, so as you go further north, the axis is, steeper and steeper. And it's a pretty steep staircase at star axis, but it's still within the range of normal staircase. It has about an 8.5-inch riser, which is a steep staircase, but still doable. Further north, the stairs would just get too steep.
We have a question from Zoom asking for the solar burns, how you prevent fires.
It's a fire-retarded particle board that's burned on, and the fire retardant in the wood. When the burns are burning, there's a flame, and as soon as the sun goes out, as soon as a cloud comes over, the flame extinguishes immediately. So the burn is very precise in terms of capturing the condition of sunlight for that day.
And this same person is asking if you can describe how you produce the prisms.
How I produce the prisms?
The prisms, yeah.
I have a fabricator that...
He's not going to tell you.
I'm not going to tell you.
I don't know either.
I used to make them myself when they were liquid filled. They used to be made out of sheets of acrylic bonded together. But now that we have a way to do them solid, it eliminates leaking.
We have a question up here.
Well, going from the spiritual and the scientific to the more mundane, I live in a place where they're building a lot of high-density housing, and people are looking at a wall when they look out their window at the house next to them. And my question is there a affordable or layman's opportunity to put prisms on this high-density housing to make it more beautiful?
Could you get, she's asking if there is a more affordable way for people to use prisms she's describing like in a lot of housing, you look out to the house next to you. Or to a wall, and so is there a way that we could use, you're asking if there's a way we could use prisms in our housing to sort of beautify, is it, yeah? Yeah.
I don't know how to answer that question.
Well, I think one thing we're experiencing today, because we're here on a partly cloudy day, if there's not a direct view of the sun, then the prism's not going to cast. And so if something's blocking the window, then you're probably not going to get it. You really have to have the sun. It's not ambient light, it's actually direct sunlight.
Yeah, they have to be struck by direct sunlight.
Yeah.
Is there any realm in which there's a layman's affordable way to build a prison that could be mounted?
Is there an affordable way that people could make their own? Well, there are smaller prisms.
There are smaller prisms you can buy online.
Yeah.
Little ones.
And play around with them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even when Charles was beginning work on the piece here and did his first site visit, you came with a smaller prism.
Yeah, I did.
That you were able to test and see. Okay, yeah, the sun. It will get nice strong spectra here, and so. You could buy from like a scientific catalog of prism and see what happens. We have a little more time. We have a question. We have a couple questions. We have 3 questions, or 4 questions. All right. Let's see how many of these questions we can get to. We'll start back there.
I'm just asking about your history. So do you have a background in science that inspired your art, or did your art inspire your interest in science?
Do you have a background in science?
Yeah, I started in mathematics and then went to physics, and then I was forced to take 2 units of liberal arts to graduate from math in Berkeley, which I fought like crazy. And finally my advisor said, why don't you take sculpture? No, we only need pass or fail. Nobody fails sculpture, and you can work on mathematics in the clay or whatever. Nobody will care. And a couple of months later, they called me in and said, what happened to you? And I said, what do you mean? They said, well, your grades went from like a 3.6 to a 2 in the space of 2 months in math. And I said, well, sculpture. And they said, what do you want to do about it? And I said, let me get my undergrad in math, and then I want to go into graduate sculpture. And it was Berkeley in the 60s where you could do things like that, and they put me in the master's degree program in sculpture, and I never left the sculpture studio for 3 years. That's all I did. So.
In creating the solar burns, is the lens that you used a prism or more of a photographic lens with a focus ability?
What type of lens do you use when you're making the solar burns?
Oh, it's a Fresnel lens. And they're rings that are carved in a flat sheet, if you know what a Fresnel is. And for the big solar burns, it's about 3 by 4 foot, the lens. It's like this by this. And for the smaller ones, it's a lens about this big around.
We have a question down here in the 4th row.
Have you made like a big glass, like hollowed out glass prism to like stand in?
I didn't.
Have you ever, he's asking if you've ever made a hollowed out prism that someone could stand inside.
Well, the earlier prisms were all hollow, but I've never made one you could stand inside. No.
Down here in the front row. Here comes the microphone.
Thank you so much for this fascinating talk. I really appreciate it. One of my questions has to do with clock drives. Do you ever install the prisms on clock drives so that you can concentrate or build, like, say, a color chamber where you have a slit? And also, do you work with diffraction grading at all?
I don't use diffraction gratings. But what was the other part of the question?
Clock drive.
Clock drive. I don't know what that is.
Do you ever mount the clock drive? Is what you use to point a telescope at a particular part of the sky to take a time exposure. And I'm wondering if you ever use a clock drive to make a stationary. It compensates for the motion of the sun, and so it would like focus. The rainbow would stay in one place, possibly.
No, I've never. You're talking about a mirror that fixes the sun.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's a motor that's
The motor that, yeah, right. Only in one place have we used motors on the prisms, and that's in the Harvard Business School chapel. With the prisms up against the wall, when the spectrum hit the wall, it would just come down like this and hit the floor. And we wanted it to last longer, and so we rotate the prism backwards in time and slow the speed of the spectrum falling down the wall.
Your question about the prisms casting imagery into houses, I think maybe more like a large periscope is what you'd be looking at, right? Like mirrors, not prisms.
We are close. Okay, we have one more question up here, and then I'm going to do a final question from the Zoom.
Hello. Thank you so much for this talk and for being here. It's an honor. My question is regarding star axis, which is very incredible. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. And I was wondering if there is a question that you had in mind for the viewer, maybe something that they would ask themselves upon visiting this site. Is there anything that you had in mind?
What was that question?
He's asking for star axis, is there a question that you would like the visitors to have in mind when they experience the piece?
No, just discovering how star geometry fits the body. All of everything that's in star axis, all the angles, measurements, proportions, everything is star geometry brought down into physical form so it can be experienced in human scale. And so you make your own discoveries at star axis.
Thank you.
You can discover how star geometry fits you for your own personal,
I would say, though, as someone who just visited it. I think that feeling this intense connection with history and with a history that also includes people that have been mapping the stars and thinking about the stars. That was it. Actually makes you feel better about life. Like at a time when we don't always feel that way, to feel connected to the past and our ancestors. And so maybe that wasn't intentional. Maybe that's just because you've got all these medievalists coming in. But that certainly was part of it for me.
Everything at Star Axis is intentional.
So our last question is from online is asking how can one visit Star Axis, which might be more of a question for the future than right now. But do you want to talk a little bit about how people visit now and how we hope people will visit in the future?
Well, at the moment, we're not open to visitors only. We're only open for fundraising events and backers that come to visit it. But eventually, it'll be open to the public. But if you want to become a backer or make a contribution, you can go on to staraxis.org and look at the visitors program.
Great.
Did I get that right, Jill? Jill is on the other end of staraxis.org.
Well, thank you, Charles. Thank you, everyone. What I want to propose, we've been inside. I don't know if it's cloudy or sunny right now. And if it's cloudy, you're not going to see much with Spectrum 14, but maybe it's sunny. So I think we're all going to go up there and take a look. And if it's sunny, that might be great. And this time of day is a really good time, if it's sunny, to sort of climb the stairs and get that view. And that also allows you, if you go all the way to the top, for one of the sets of prisms, you're almost at them when you're up on that mezzanine. And so you can actually inspect the prisms a little bit better. And so I think that's what we'll do now. I would also very much encourage you, if you have not been to the rest of the Lumen exhibition, today's a great day to visit it. Please go visit it. It's worth it. So yeah, thank you, Charles. Thank you, everyone.
And I want to put in a thank you too, thanks to the great Getty team who made this installation a dream to do.
Great.